Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Your Healthy, Blissful Life. My name is Shannon Lee. I am the host, and tonight we're going to be discussing Soul Food Junkies, the history of food in the African American culture. We're going to be discussing a documentary that aired on PBS, currently airing on Netflix, and I'd like to go ahead and welcome our guest. This evening we have Ernest Flemings. He is a public health nutritionist supervisor. He holds degrees in culinary arts and culinary nutrition, and he has spent the last 7 years working in a community nutrition with a local government agency. So welcome, Ernest.
Thank you.
And we have Coach Mike. Coach Mike was born and raised in Harlem. He is currently a New Jersey resident and married with children. He recently lost over 132 pounds, which is amazing. He is now a health and fitness coach with Beachbody. Welcome, Coach Mike.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you both for coming. Unfortunately, if you were waiting to see Coach Anthony, he had a conflict in scheduling, so he will not be joining us tonight, but we will go ahead and move forward with the discussion. Thank you to everybody that's joined. And so I want to just begin with you, Ernest, and Mike. Anybody can chime in now. What were your thoughts about the what were your initial thoughts about the documentary?
You disappeared. Oh, there you are.
Okay. What were your initial thoughts about the documentary?
I thought it was very interesting. I like the approach that he eventually got to, where he realized that it wasn't just one thing that caused the problem. It's several different things. And that's what I see in the work that I do. That is not just, a culture of eating bad food. There's economics involved, transportation involved, education involved. There's a lot of different things that come together that make these decisions. And it's not going to be a one item approach to try to fix the problem either.
Right. Now, let me backtrack just a moment and give everybody just the premise of the documentary for those of you that have not seen it. Basically, it was created by filmmaker Byron Hurt. His father, unfortunately, passed away of pancreatic cancer. He linked it to his unhealthy eating habits. He initially blamed his consumption of not only soul food, but also fast food. But it kind of sent him on this journey to really just research the history of the relationship between, African Americans and soul food. He couldn't understand why his father continued to, even after his diagnosis, continued to eat poorly until he passed away. So he really kind of takes us through that journey. Mike, what were your thoughts about the film?
I definitely agree with Ernest, pretty much having the same, take on it. There's just a lack of education, and just to kind of reiterate what Ernest said, having so many, there was a few different, so many different facets that caused that. But I definitely think that it was definitely a lack of education. Obviously, I think even growing up, in Harlem and my side of town, we weren't really taught to eat properly. Just so many different things, so many different avenues that we could go there. Especially down in the south of Mississippi, where they're not from. I mean, that's really country. Mm-hmm. So they really go deep and heavy into the into really deep fried and so forth. And just I really believe for the most part of it is not having the education, not having the exposure. The transportation issues. It was multiple things.
Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of the film, because the filmmaker is based in New York, or he was raised in New York. Family was originally from a small town in Georgia. He was working in Newark, New Jersey. So I'm assuming you, Mike, who are in that area where he is, was talking about just like the disparity in the community in terms of where residents can actually even go for, for healthy food choices and things of that nature. Is that something that you saw growing up and that you continue to see in those areas?
you start to see them develop more, more now. I mean, you start to see the Trader Joe's, the Whole Foods. However, they obviously are not as close to the urban areas that you would think. So you're obviously going to see those type of stores where you have access to, to healthy groceries. You obviously will see the gyms, but you'll have more of a, you have your workout world, your $10 a month, now you're starting to see more retro fitnesses pop up. So I think more and more I think the younger generation of people in this area, in my area, are really starting to get more educated on it, because obviously, what they're learning and what's being kind of portrayed right now, being fit is starting to, to have a healthy lifestyle is kind of like, as you could say. But in those areas now, you go to Harlem right now, you absolutely start to see a lot more healthy selections. People are obviously more educated. And again, it's more of the younger generation, not so more of the older generation.
Right. Now, Ernest, you work in public health. What are some of the trends that you see in your community in terms of eating habits, access to resources, in terms of healthy, places to actually access healthy foods?
It's the same thing too here, where it's generational, where they've gotten used to doing this from generation to generation. And then a lot of it around here is transportation. It's being able to get to the locations where you're going to see healthy foods. You see, there's some grocery stores that pop up in certain areas, but even if you go to some of them, the choices aren't all that great. There was a segment in the video where I'm not sure what the lady's name was, but she had spoke about going into a grocery store and the vegetables were all withered, and she was appalled that this is available. And in some of the areas around here, that is what you see. And you talk to some of the store managers, and they're kind of in a conflict where they have to take that chance of getting the fresh vegetables in, but they got to hope that someone's going to buy them as well. Because if they don't buy them, then they're wasting their money. And at the end of the day, they're still a business, and they can't, or they're not willing to put money in, and they're not getting a return back from it. So then that's when you're going to flip onto the education piece where, where you have to teach people how to use these fresh vegetables. And the area that I work in, I mainly deal with children, and there's a lot of children that, they can't identify certain vegetables. They've never seen them. They don't know what an eggplant is. They don't know what asparagus is. Lettuce and tomato, and that's because that comes on a burger. And that's if they even eat that. They don't know what a lot of these different items are just because they're not exposed to it. And then when you have young parents who are raising young children that wasn't exposed to it themselves, they go with what they know. It's easier to get, this or that because this is the cheapest item. This is going to be the most convenient item, because now time is also a factor in trying to, get the things that you need. And if you don't have the transportation, another obstacle is, okay, maybe you can catch the bus or something like that, but then there's only so many groceries you can take with you on the bus, or willing to take with you on the bus. So then now you also have to be picky as to what you purchase. And I actually also lived in New Jersey for a brief few years in the late 90s. And I also saw that as well, where I had several friends where their parents, they didn't have cars. And so if they didn't catch the bus to go to the Pathmart or something like that, they went to the local store that was around the corner, and that's what it is. That's what was available. They didn't eat really healthy at all. And, at that time, I didn't know what healthy really was, barely knew what it meant. That's just what you see. It was common to go over a friend's house and see, the unhealthy foods, the fried chicken, the collard greens, the ribs and the fried pork chops and things like that, because that's what I saw. So I assumed that was just normal.
And the film really goes into, it was really an education for me, because essentially I grew up in the suburbs. So when they start to talk about, people having to, go to the liquor store to get vegetables, and go to the, the bodegas and whatever corner store that was available to get any type of groceries, that was kind of like, eye-opening to me. Now, Mike, you recently went through this whole, weight loss transformation. You lost, over 132 pounds. And so talk to me kind of about, and I know that you identify as Latino, and so a lot of those cultural foods come into play. And so talk to me about your history and your relationship with food growing up in Harlem, and kind of as it relates to some of what we saw was happening in the film.
Oh, it's pretty much the same thing. It's just different types of food. People from the Caribbean, whether it's from, how you're eating Southern African American food, soul food. I mean, I grew up between Blacks and Latinos. So, we had the exposure to soul food, or you was either eating plátanos, rice and beans, a type of meat every day. And the pork chops were fried. Everything was pretty much fried. And, just overindulging in rice, not really even having vegetables. And again, I want to touch on what Ernest just said about not even being familiarized with some of these vegetables. I remember, in my old neighborhood, we didn't really have a healthy supermarket like that until they opened up what they call the Fairway on 125th Street, right by the West Side Highway. Once that was exposed and people started shopping there, and then again, as time went on, then people started getting more educated. But, seeing asparagus in a bodega, they were like, what? So all you saw was your lettuce and tomatoes. And then it was just like, and then you would probably see cilantro or certain herbs that, we would cook with. Right. But you damn sure would see 100 plátanos, which, plantains in a bodega. You would see avocado, and that would probably be about the healthiest fat that would you would ever see in a bodega. So, growing up like that, it was just really the same thing. It was just, we were taught, it's funny, I kind of had a conversation. I kind of did a cooking show, and I kind of went back to how my mother would cook with salt in her rice. And it wasn't like a measuring teaspoon. It was, you just kind of count 1, 2, 3 with this big jar of salt. And we didn't know how much we were overindulging in salt. And, henceforth, minorities have serious issues when it comes to high blood pressure because of the overindulgence of salt. We don't know how much we're taking in. Right.
Well, you brought up something, that's a good point, because the film talks about really just the history. It talks really about how essentially, the food, a lot of the food that we cook in the South, and it does touch on some foods that come out of the Caribbean, because in certain areas like Louisiana, a lot of the culinary, the foods are mixed. And so they're eating more of the foods that came, that are still, that people eat in the Caribbean. But when it comes to Southern cuisine, it talks about how it really just originated from what the slaves were given to eat, what they were permitted to grow. And so it really just, it talks about, just really, it calls it kind of like a survival food. And so what we're dealing with now is that back then, even though, it was still, you're eating pig ears and all this type of thing, they still grew, they grew their own food. They fed their own animals. And so now we're still making soul food, but we're making it with even more, sugar and even more salt. We're eating even more, we're just eating processed food. So it's almost even more detrimental to our health than it would have been. So when we use certain excuses like, well, our ancestors, they ate it and it didn't kill them, it's almost like we can't even use that excuse.
No, you're right. Well, it's funny. It's not even only that, but nowadays you start going into, if we were back in the day where our, like our great grandparents or our grandmothers or even our parents, the food and the meat that they ate, they was actually organic. So now you're dealing with, all this stuff with foods with pesticides. They didn't have that back then, and. Right. So not only were they dealing with an obesity issue, but now are we only dealing with that, but now you got to deal with cancer. You got to deal with all sorts of crazy things that are happening all the antibiotics and that's being injected into these animals, which they weren't eating back then. So yeah, they were eating bad, and they were eating like everything from the rooter to the tutor, right?
Right.
But
yeah.
it was a different type of pig, though. Right now, you got genetically modified meat that's out there, which is really scary. So not only are you eating with fried and saturated oils, but now you're taking in, all sorts of injections that they're giving these animals to, multiply. And so it's even more dangerous than what it was.
Mm-hmm.
I think another thing that, to speak on to that too, is that one of the problems is when it comes to the food industry, quality has taken a back seat to quantity. And so when people are thinking they're trying to, stretch their dollars and things like that, they're trying to say, okay, well, I have $1. How much can I buy for this dollar? But they're not realizing that there's a reason why that only costs $1. And it's because the quality of the item is not there. So when you make that argument, like you said, well, my grandparents ate this, there was nothing wrong. The quality of the food is so much different because of that paradigm shift.
Mm-hmm. I agree. The film asks the question, is soul food, which basically used to be Southern food, it was regionalized, and then it became, a racial title after the Black Power movement, when they just attributed the label, soul music, soul food, soul to everything. And so the film asks the question, is soul food causing illness? Is it causing us to die? And it just lists, just a plethora of different illnesses that we're dealing with in our community in terms of, heart disease, cancer, things that might not kill you that will definitely, impact your lifestyle. Tell us about some of those things that affect our community in terms of, the way that we're eating, Ernest.
Me personally, I don't think that it's necessarily soul food or McDonald's or things like that, because I think it comes down to choice, to a certain degree. I have the choice to go to McDonald's. I have the choice to fry that chicken. I also have the choice to bake that chicken. And so, yeah, soul food has has become, connected to a racial thing and things like that. But it doesn't necessarily, if you're eating the food in moderation, you should be fine. Mm-hmm. You don't have to consume it every single day, fry every single thing. And really, I think one of the points that the video had said at one point was that, soul food really shouldn't be about that particular item. It should be about what makes you happy. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be the fried food and things like that, but that's hard to get people to understand, is that it comes down ultimately to choice. You can choose to do that, or you can choose not to do that. You're driving to work, you can choose to stop and pick up some fast food, or you can choose to plan out your breakfast that morning or the night before.
Good point. Yeah, and I know we're pretty much all in the business of teaching people how to eat, helping them relearn how to eat. Ernest, I know you do workshops, and Mike, you do, the Beachbody Fitness, the health program, and that's all about, portion control and those types of things. I know there was just a lot of comments, even in the film, that you probably have heard yourselves, as long as we eat a little bit of vegetables with this, we should be fine, or, or people need to worry about what they're eating to stay out of my plate, So what's some of the resistance that you get when you're trying to educate people?
For me, most of the time it's money. If I have $5, I can go and get 5 things from the dollar menu, as opposed to they think that, I have to spend more than that to go get a bunch of groceries. But then it's trying to explain to them that, okay, yeah, you may spend more than $5 on some groceries, but once you break that down per meal, it's actually much cheaper to do it that way than it is to go spend that $5 on whatever the dollar menu is or anything like that. Because now, since you spent it on groceries, if you plan it out properly, you can have more than one meal.
Exactly.
You spend that $5. That's it. Now you need another $5 for later on to figure out how you're going to eat then. So for me personally, it comes down to economics and education, trying to educate them and help them out with learning, okay, this is how you can do this, or this is how you prepare this particular item right there. Because again, because of that lack of education of knowing certain vegetables or beans or meats and things like that, if they don't know how to cook these things, they're not going to purchase them. And they're not going to, it doesn't matter, how much education you tell them, oh, this particular item right here is so good. This would just help you out so much. But if mom or dad or grandma or grandpa or whoever's cooking the food doesn't know how to prepare that item, it's not getting into their body. They can't benefit from the nutrition of that particular item. So again, like I said, from my experience, it comes down to education and economics.
Okay. And Mike, and I know you're online. You're actively kind of doing that right now. You're trying to teach people portion control, and you're trying to teach people how to prepare, healthier meals. So can you speak to that?
Well, absolutely. I think, just to segue from, what Ernest was saying was that, let's think about it. If we don't have the education, this is originally what I said when I first came on, is that we're not educated. So we don't know how to meal prep. We don't know what certain vegetables do for you. The other thing is, economics. People will say, well, you know what, I can't spend $140 on a program, or I don't want to do that. I can't afford it. But these are the same people that have a cigarette habit, that will have a habit or will incorporate, whether it's, illegal substances in their, monthly budget.
Right.
Then, in addition to that, now you got a drinking problem. So you hit up a liquor store, you buy cigarettes, you're buying everything else during the week, but you're not doing the math. So one of the things that I came to conclusion was that when it comes to Blacks and Latinos and just minorities in general, we're very visual. They want to see. And I think that was one of the purposes that, that me and my partner had kind of did that live. We went live on Facebook doing that cooking show, was because people want to actually see you do. If you go on my Instagram profile, you see all these pictures of food. Right. And the first thing a lot of people say, well, either, he probably photoshopped it or he bought that food. So now let me show you exactly what I'm making. And when they start seeing how simple it is, or you start explaining ingredients, why certain oils, well, why should we use coconut oil versus corn oil, the health benefits, and, also results. So visual is extremely important. They want to see, especially when someone, and sometimes, you actually have to see it for yourself. We're really touching and feeling people. So having that experience and having that bond when I had that cooking show on Facebook, I think that, that was awesome. And, the feedback that I got from that was like, wow, I really didn't know that. I didn't know that, you can eat it's better to eat 5 to 6, 7 times a day versus 2 big meals. And the type of things that are good for you, what causes heart disease, and just going into so many things, again, going back into the meat, why it's important to eat organic, so listen, you start seeing chicken breasts that are the size of footballs, that's a problem, so that's just not normal. And it comes down to education again.
And so even in the film, it talks about how in our communities, food is an event, and if somebody offers you a plate, you take that plate, those are the manners that you were taught. And it's not about portion control, and so how easy is that to teach to people that are, basically starting from square one, they've never thought about, what something 5 ounces looks like, instead of doing, a half a chicken, in one sitting. Like, how easy is that to translate?
For me, it depends on what tools you have. We use different food models and things like that, and that usually helps out a lot when they can, again, like Mike was saying, visualization. When you can see it. If I tell you go have 4 ounces of chicken, okay, I have no idea what that is, so I'm going to go ahead and have this half a chicken. But then if I show you what 4 ounces of meat looks like, you have a better idea of what it is. And then even if you can do like a demonstration, a food demonstration to show people, okay, this plate right here, if you look at it, there's 4 ounces of meat. There's, 5-6 ounces of vegetables. It's a nice even plate, and it's going to keep you full. It's not going to be, because a lot of people, the misconception is, if you eat healthy, then I'm still going to be hungry and I can't do that. But you can be full and eat properly as well.
Right. Was there anything about the film, like I keep saying, it was a total education to me. One of the scenes that stood out was when he went down to Jackson, Mississippi with the tailgaters, and and they've got this big pot, they call it junk pot with the pig feet.
That was crazy. My heart, I felt it. My heart started hurting when I saw that.
And they would let him go until he at least had some turkey neck bones.
I remember when I was younger, we used to eat fairly unhealthy, and I'm not sure what happened. Something clicked in my mother's mind, and we stopped pork completely. And I remember we were one of the first people to eat ground turkey, and everyone's looking at us like we're crazy. But I just remember one particular time drove probably like 30, 45 minutes to go visit an aunt of mine. When we get to that house and we open up the door, and the smell of chitlins cooking was just so horrible that we turned around and got back in the car and went back home. It just was not what we could do.
Well, another thing that really was interesting to me, they had Dick Gregory, comedian and activist Dick Gregory, in the documentary. And I had no idea that he was. I mean, there were so many people that were involved in the film. There were culinary historians, food justice activists, all these titles I've never even heard of. And they get to Dick Gregory, who apparently, since his involvement in trying to end segregation and all of his activism back in the 60s and 70s. At some point, he switched over to vegetarianism, and then he became a fruitarian at some point. But he kind of linked his activism. It kind of crossed over into it kind of crossed over into food activism, because he basically felt like, first of all, he didn't like animal cruelty, so he completely stopped eating meat. And then he kind of felt like the buying of meat was really something that was contributing to the efforts of white supremacy, because we were eating so bad in the African American community that we were essentially helping them by killing ourselves. And there's a story, and I'll put a couple links over in the side for everyone to see. But I was reading about a story about where he had gone into a restaurant, and he actually bought some stocks in the actual restaurant before he went and did his sit-in. And so when they tried to have him forcibly removed, he let management know he was a part owner. So he was real serious about it. But everything he did during the movement, and when they were trying to eradicate the Jim Crow laws and things like that, kind of turned him off of meat. And then they talk about, and the film also mentions Black nationalists at the time, and they were proponents of, just being vegetarians, how soul food, Southern food, whatever you want to call it, was just slave food. And it was something that was affecting our psyche and something that was affecting our physical health. In terms of the psychology of food, I know that the filmmaker mentions his father, and he talks about how his mother died when he was 10, how his father was an alcoholic and very abusive, how his first son, died in a tragic accident when he was 4. So when you are doing your work, how much do you see with your clients and with the people that you interact with, how much do you see that psychology kind of come into, their relationship with food?
I see it quite a bit as well, just because it's comforting. It's something that they don't have to think about. They don't have to worry about, and trying to eat healthy can be a lot of work. And it's easier just to not to and stay into the same old habits of eating these foods that their grandparents ate, that their grandparents ate. And it's just, it tastes good. And usually if it tastes good, more than likely it's not good for you. But it just, that's just the way they think. It's hard to break that mentality, especially, again, when you have other factors involved to get them to think differently.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Mike, with your client?
From the psychological aspect of it, I'm going to say that, it's going about visual, right? I think what you first have to do is slowly introduce a change, and it's about change. So the first thing that I always try to tell people, say, hey, you know what? Why don't we, instead of eating that chicken fried, okay, how about starting making that transition into baked?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We can also replace different seasonings with salt. Or let's use the right salt. You talk to somebody in the Black or Hispanic community about kosher salt or Himalayan salt, they look at you like this. What? And they're like, what the hell is that, Himalayan?
You're getting too fancy, Mike.
Right, exactly. So they're like, oh no. Well, you know what? The thing is that this salt it's exposed. They just don't know. They don't see it because all they're used to seeing in their household is that bottle of salt that has red and white and says iodine. Okay, because it's all visual. They don't know that kosher salt is actually in that same shelf. Yeah. But they don't look at it. So it's all visual. It's color. They just go right to it because their brain is programmed to go right there. So from that psychological aspect of it, it's about teaching. It's about the education. In addition to that, you also now need to have some sort of support system, because doing this on your own is extremely tough. And that was one of the things that I decided for me that attracted me about, becoming a Beachbody coach was that I saw the support system. I saw that I really had people that were teaching me the right way, that educated me and say, hey, you know what, let's divert this way. Well, instead of you eating rice and beans, how about you eating brown rice and beans? So slowly I started adapting and making that change. And psychologically, I started thinking different. Also too, just reading, something that developmental books that actually help you. Also too, just how within a week time span, how I remember that first week, I wasn't feeling as slow. I had a little bit more energy. I was eating less. My back wasn't hurting. So you know what, that all takes mentally. It starts to work. It starts to work. And you know what? One of the amazing things about the programs that I use, the 21-day fix, the reason why they call that program that is because it takes your body 21 days to make adaptation to anything. So it's scientifically proven it takes you 21 days to make a change, to actually start getting introduced into something new, whether you're even trying to quit smoking after those 21 days, or actually just it takes 21 days to get into habit. Once you break that, you are now into a cycle, and you just got to keep on repeating, and you have that, a support system. And that just goes in life with it in general, with anything. If you're trying something new, you're trying to be successful, you need to have some sort of system. A lot of times people, because of pride issues, they don't want to listen to you because they feel that they have to take instructions from somebody else. And you actually have to deal with type of kookiness like that, believe it or not. So that's what I've encountered, but definitely from it is psychological. And you know what, you guys, all of you here have probably heard it. You know what, it starts up here. It's mental.
Definitely.
It's mental. So it is a psychological thing.
One of the things that I loved about the film, and a lot of people know that I'm a green smoothie cleanse coach, you really have to find something that is fit for your personality, because I'm a mono eater. I started doing the 10-day green smoothie cleanse by J.J. Smith. It worked for me. I lost over 40 pounds, but I'm a mono eater. I could, do green smoothies for 6 months and be fine. A lot of people are not going to, it might not be something that's going to work for them. but they had a gentleman in the film that was entertaining, that talks about how he started to deal with some hypertension, impotence, and that was something, and he's a married, older guy. And so you see him on there, and he's doing his green smoothies, and he's doing his juicing, and he's, working out and talking about how, things have turned around for him. So it shows kind of like an older generation that are starting to understand the benefits of, a healthy lifestyle. It also shows the process and some schools and programs that are opening up that are trying to give that education to the students. Was there anything that stood out in the film to you in terms of, just overall programs and education? And, do you feel like, okay, well, do you see that kind of stuff starting to happen in your community, or do you feel like there's a need for so much more?
There definitely is a need for so much more. Oh, I'm sorry, Ernest.
Okay.
There definitely is a need for so much more. I think, as, a younger generation, if we start doing outreaches, start even going into our gyms, or even offering these types of workshops, or just not with social media in general, having these type of things is an outreach. So, we're living it right now as we're speaking. This is an outreach. We're trying to we're having a discussion on health and what's bad for us. So having these type of things is definitely, it has grown. Do we need it a lot more? Absolutely. We definitely need to tap into more into our urban communities and really just reach out into the health, industry. Obviously the obesity level is insane. You even go out into Europe and, you definitely, they don't have, the obesity that we have here in the US. But it's about education. It's about, and that's where it starts. And we just need to really pour right back out into those communities. What I have planned and goal for this year is to actually, go out and doing, workout workshops, in the neighborhoods, really promoting that fitness and just providing information. And I think that's what we need to do. With having social media platforms, it really, really helps tremendously.
Ernest?
I was going to say in my area, I see that there are some changes, especially with the school system, but I think that there's some education that's being done. There's more that needs to be done. One thing that I found out probably about a year or so ago, I think maybe it's 2 years now, but in the schools in the city that I work in, they actually went in and removed all the fryers. So there's no fryer laters at all in any of the schools, high school, elementary, anything. And some of the kids don't even realize it. And looking at some of the foods that they eat, they don't realize how actually good they do eat. And I think that part of it, the education, is kind of missing. But I'm happy that they are making certain steps. But they're making changes like whole wheat pizza, whole wheat rolls, oven fried chicken, things like that. And I remember being in one school and having a conversation with a young lady where, we were having that economic conversation where she had made the comment, I don't understand, because I can go and take my dollar and walk across the street and there was a fast food place. And she was like, I can get me a chicken sandwich. And I was like, well, the thing is, what you don't realize is the chicken sandwich that you're getting over there is not really a whole lot of chicken going on in it. And when I see the girl that was sitting her was like, see, I told you that's not real chicken. And I was like, if you ever get a chance, why don't you Google what a chicken patty really is? And you'll see, again, the comment that I made, there's a reason why it costs $1. And I was like, the chicken that you're getting here, this is whole muscle meat. This is real chicken. And, she couldn't understand, again, what the difference in taste was, because the chicken nugget tastes great. And the other, it's not that the other chicken tasted bad. It's just, it was different. And it's trying to explain to her, well, that's actually what chicken is supposed to taste like. You're tasting real chicken and not a processed food item. I mean, and they make other changes. They're participating in different government programs where they're getting fresh fruits and vegetables in the classroom and things like that. So there are a lot of changes, at least in this area, that I see going on. I just don't know how much education is being followed up with it, so that way they can understand these are why the changes are being made, and it's not just a mandate and you have to eat this, but there's a good reason behind it because it's for, optimal health.
Mm-hmm. Very good. And Ernest is in the Tidewood area, in case we didn't mention that before. In the documentary, it mentions a book called How to Eat to Live, which was apparently influential to the filmmaker himself. Wasn't a member of the Nation of Islam, but said that he took a lot of principles from the book, and apparently was very popular. It was turned into 2 books. It was reprinted. The Nation of Islam itself, at one point in time, had over 70,000 readers just for its newsletter. And so they were printing different healthy eating articles. Of course, there are some figures, Malcolm X and different public figures that appealed to African Americans across the board. And so they spread that message of, a healthy eating lifestyle. He promoted vegetarianism. I even found an article that was, printed back in 1974 in Ebony that was talking about vegetarianism, featured Cicely Tyson. So I don't know. I don't know where it seems like it was popular then. It was gaining some type of popularity. So I don't know what happened, and I don't know if it was a decline of, the end of the civil rights movement was the end of the interest in, rejecting some of those, the opposition to just acclimating to American standards. But a point was made in the film that if we could make health and wellness part of our pop culture now, that we could, basically change the future and change the kind of like the path that we're on in terms of having so many people dying from cancer and things like that in the African American community. Do you agree with that?
I do. I think that just like, anything else that comes in popular culture that catches on, I think something like this could catch on too. We just have to be careful about what is the message that's being presented, because just like you can get people hooked on to a good message, you can just tweak something just a little bit and it ends up being a bad message, and you've just set yourself back because you've promoted this particular item that appears to be healthy, but then when it really comes down to it, there's not a whole lot in it. But now you've made all these people think that it's a good thing. But I think that we can use the tools that we have, whether it be, if a celebrity can endorse Pepsi, why can't they endorse an apple from a local farmer or something like that? Just as a basic idea. I think it can happen. It's just getting people on board with it.
Mm-hmm. And what about you, Mike? In terms of, do you get any feedback? Like, do people still feel like it's a white thing to be into, health and wellness and the healthy living lifestyle and fitness and these types of things? What are the responses that you get?
No, I really don't get that. I just really, what I get is just more ignorance. When you're ignorant, it's just because you don't know something. Mm-hmm. And again, and I hate to be repetitive, it's just the education. And a lot of people now do want to know. I think that, entertainers are a huge part of it, of the influence, kind of like what Ernest said, hey, instead of promoting Pepsi, or coming out of McDonald's, why not have a commercial of the Whole Foods, right? Mm-hmm. But the reality is that you start talking to people in, lower income housing. Can they afford to go to Whole Foods? Does Whole Foods even accept,
EBT or yeah.
They don't. And so at that point is the question, do you start asking, hey, why aren't you offering the opportunity for everyone to get healthy? Because it seems that they're just targeting, people within a certain bracket of income, to maintain that healthy, so then what happens to everybody else? So they have to just eat the crumbs and the leftovers. And going back to the documentary, if you look at if you remember what they were saying about even the rice, they were getting the bad part of the rice.
Yeah.
So they have to eat that.
Historically, everything was what could not be sold or
Exactly.
Some other groups did not want to consume.
Exactly. So, you know, and if you go into, you know, obviously into Caucasian cultures, do you really hear about them eating pig feet and ears? Because no, they weren't, you know, introduced to that. You know, they were introduced to straight, I mean, pork chops with lean cut pieces of meat, you know. So, you know, to me, even to this day, some people will be like, oh, well, you know, a great piece of lean like pork is good for you. And I'm like, oh, you know, I hear pork, I'm just thinking about, you know, and let me tell you, Latino, listen, Christmas time, we do the pernil, the pork shoulder. I'm keeping it so real, you know, and I will eat it, you know, because, but you know, do I eat like that all the time? No, that's not a lifestyle that I choose anymore. But because of my culture, how I grew up on, you know, I'm always gonna have that piece of pork shoulder in the holidays, and you know what, and it is what it is. But you know, it's just the education, but obviously having that influence. And you know what? I'm going to tell you right now, if you look at the majority of athletes that are out there that are successful, they're people of color. You know, they're black, they're Latinos. I mean, basketball. I mean, I say no more. So as far as what we have in our blood, and even going, you know, within the black communities, we have that athletic bone in our bodies to be athletes.
Right.
Latino, I mean, they're swinging a baseball since they're a baby. So you know what? It just, it's a trait. The only thing that is being the lack of education is the food, because we do have drive, we have athletic muscles, we have that capability to do so. We're introduced to that. You know, when we were kids and let out in the street, we would just play ball all day. So you know, we have that fit bone in our bodies. It's just the lack of not knowing how to eat. You know, because you know, you have kids that'll play ball outside all day, but then they'll put McDonald's into their body.
Right.
Instead of, now, if they're educated properly and say, you know what, I know that I'm an athlete. You know what if I ate this way? How can this improve, you know, my ability? How is this going to, you know, make me, you know, my endurance? What's going to help me build that? So they don't know, you know, but now as athletes grow, and you know, now you even have entertainers that are fit. You know, you have a lot of people that are fit right now. You know, I mean, we'll go into the rappers. I don't know, 50 Cent. I mean, the guy is built like a rock. So that definitely inspires other people to be that way.
Right. We're going to take a moment just to take one of our viewers' questions. LD Baldwin, thanks for joining us. And she says, speaking of first weeks, what would be your number one tip for someone in their first week of eating differently? What's one thing they can do that's simple, but that would give them quick encouragement? Anyone can answer.
One simple tip.
We already have drink lots of water. Another commenter said lots of water.
The first thing I always do, I tell everybody, you want to start making change, the first thing you do, and first thing in the morning, you know, a lot of people just used to putting down the first thing in their body is a cup of coffee. A lot of your body is really made up of water. So what you need to do is put an 8-ounce glass of water in your body. Start seeing that change. That's actually going to help your metabolism start speeding up. So an 8-ounce glass of water, preferably with lemon, that's the first thing that I put down as soon as I work. As opposed to, I used to maybe put down a cup of coffee. The other thing is that if, you know, you're having a hard time adapting to portions, whatever you were eating, start eating half of that on your plate.
I would say set yourself up for success. So if you know that you're going into your first week, then it's, you know, what's in the house, what's in your fridge, what's in your cabinets, what, you know, take out some quick things that you can, you know, cut up or keep handy, nuts, whatever, you know, is lower in calories but still nutritious. Make sure that that's the kind of stuff that you have handy. Set yourself up for success. Don't sit there and, you know, and have hunger cravings and not even have anything prepared and available to go, because that's when you're going to start to backslide immediately.
I was going to say, on the other side of that is remove the items that you shouldn't be having, so that way it doesn't become an option. So that way, if you are looking for a particular snack or something like that, you're not sitting there choosing between the cookie or the nuts. If the cookies aren't there at all, then you don't have to worry about it.
Yep. Have a plan. Going back to what you were saying, if you don't plan, if you fail to plan, that, you know, it's really, it's going to go totally against you. You need to have a plan. You need to have some sort of execution. You need to have things written down. So usually, if you're starting a weight loss journey, and just like with any other goals that you're setting in life, if you don't write them down, it's going to be really difficult to really accomplish that. So one of the first things that I would do is start to write your meals down for the week. This is what I do before I actually go food shopping. What is it that you're going to eat? A lot of people just go and they're going to start a diet on Monday, and what they'll do is that Sunday they'll go to the supermarket, they'll buy too much food, they'll buy over. Just all they'll do is buy chicken, and then they'll get so bored of it, especially if you're the type of person that gets bored of something really quick. So have a plan written out. What is it that you're going to have Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday? And prepare. So, that's what's all about meal prepping is all about too. That was, part of that cooking show that I did, was just to have a plan of success. So like that, it's, the likelihood of you failing is going to be, obviously a lot less once you have that in front of you. And what Ernest said, get rid of what you have in at the house. Anything that's bad for you, if it's sitting there, you're going to target it. You're going to gravitate to that. So, everyone is really touching on a good point.
I also try to think of, and I think of this when I first started to try to go to the gym on the regular basis, was look at what are the things that are going to get in my way. And
obstacles.
And I would think of, okay, if I wake up this early in the morning, I'm not going to feel like packing my gym bag. So then, you know what? I'm going to pack it the night before so I don't have to worry about it. I'm going to have a checklist of items that I need to make sure that's in there. Do I have a lock in there? Do I have a bottle of water in there? Do I have the things that I need? So that way, when I get up and I'm ready to go, I'm not sitting there, you know what? I can't find my locks, so I'm going back in bed. So that's one thing that I would say, was just try to think about the things that could possibly get in the way of this new change, and try your best to try to eliminate those things so you don't have to cross that bridge.
You reminded me of something, Mike. It's the beginning of the year, so I know that a lot of people have their New Year's resolutions. But for me, I'm the type of person that likes to research, and I suggest that everybody do that. Before I jumped into doing the 10-day green smoothie cleanse, I traded out my normal breakfast, for a green smoothie, and kind of played around with the recipes for a week. There are things that you're going to eat that your body is not accustomed to, and you may not even tolerate them as well. There are some greens that promote gas, and you don't even know that until you start eating that way. So, everybody's anxious to make those changes, but, take your time, do a little bit of research to find out also what's going to work for you. So those are some tips.
Don't get discouraged.
Yeah.
Things get in the way. You can't prepare or plan for everything, but don't let setbacks stop you from doing anything. As far as making your changes, just because this got in your way today, that doesn't mean you can't get up and do it tomorrow, or you can't do it later on. Very
true. Good point. There's a gentleman in the film, and I talked about him earlier. A lot of the film is about, having your identity, your racial identity caught up in the things that you eat, and kind of have some resistance to changing your diet because of that. And I think that you both stated that, you can have those things in moderation. There's nothing wrong, with enjoying the cultural dishes that you grew up with, but you have to do that type of stuff in moderation. Were there any other takeaways that you got from the film?
I think moderation is one of the things, but I think also one of the things that I like they talked about was just you can still have those things, but maybe you're cooking them or preparing them differently, or using different ingredients. So you're still having that fried chicken, but it's oven fried chicken now. Or you're having the mashed potatoes, but now it's sweet mashed potatoes now. Or maybe it's a baked potato or something like that. Or, it's just making those different changes, using a different type of oil instead of using lard or something like that, that I think that is important to take away too. So you can still have the items that you like in moderation, but then you can also, if you know that you're going to have a difficult time giving up chicken, or maybe it's that, unfortunately for your area, that's something that's going to be easier for you to purchase. So then let's look into different ways that we can prepare that particular item. It doesn't have to be fried 3 or 4 times a week.
Mm-hmm. You, Mike?
Yeah, I kind of, stated that before. It's just, that taking in that change, and just making an adaptation. Obviously, for someone that I recommend to who's starting a diet or is trying to start, I would definitely eliminate the fried food, for a bit. And then once you have maybe, start to drop and you start treating yourself and slowly but shortly, you don't want to continue. Okay, well, I'll continue to still have fried chicken. It's still bad for you. You're still having trans fat. You're still having, especially if you have clogged arteries. So you definitely have to eliminate it. But once you maintain yourself or have established now a healthy lifestyle, then by all means, hey, you know what? You got to treat yourself and not go crazy. Going back to what I said before, it's just, hey, instead of maybe having it fried, and Ernest, the oven fried, but how about baked? Maybe start using whole wheat pastas and, start just making that change. Brown rice versus white rice, what things are good, starting to learn about organics. So, that's pretty much, I think we pretty much touched on the same thing. I don't want to sound repetitive.
No problem. I think that was a lot of great information. For those of you that are watching, if you're interested in the film, it is, you can still catch it on Netflix. I came across it on PBS, but I think it's no longer airing. So catch it on Netflix. It's called Soul Food Junkies. Has just a wealth of information, a lot of different input from a lot of different experts. So it'll take you through his whole journey and give you some helpful health information as well. Ernest, is there anything that's coming up for you, or if somebody wanted to ask you a question, is there some way that they can reach you? What types of things are you doing in your community?
Right now, we're really focused on our health commissioner's goal is to make Virginia the healthiest state in the nation. So we're really focused on trying to find different ways to help people in the community reach the services that we provide. And right now we're really focused on trying to look at the transportation barrier. So we're looking at ways that instead of expecting them to come to us, that we're trying to go to them, and then working with the partners that are in the community. Because a lot of times we see the same people, they just don't see all of us. And so using different referrals and things like that to try to help people out and connect people to other resources that, okay, hey, if you're coming to see me, then, you can go see this person, or you can go see that person, or maybe they have an issue with something that this particular program may be able to help them out. So that's primarily what we're working on right now, is really trying to get back in the community, increase the awareness of the plethora of programs that are available to help out the community, so we can spread the education so people can start making those informed choices.
I know you work for a local government agency. For somebody that doesn't have a lot of resources, where do they start to get this type of information? Where's like the one place that they can begin to start to get that information?
Not to be biased, but I think the best place to start is really the health department. They can start there, and that can really link you to a lot of different programs that are within the community.
Perfect. And Mike, what's next for you, and how can people reach you?
So I think I'm going to be putting out another cooking show on Facebook, and being that we have an event coming, which is obviously in this country, which is the Super Bowl, a lot of people tend to overindulge in that event. That is a dangerous event. And what I'm planning on doing is actually making a healthy Super Bowl. So me and my partner were talking about putting another cooking show live on Facebook, just to replace certain things. So instead of having regular chili, doing a turkey chili, healthy dips, what's the recommended snacks that we can replace? And it's going to be interesting, because, I got some nice stuff up my sleeve. Also, I have waiting actually on approval from a Whole Foods that's letting me conduct a workout inside the supermarket, and also
That's different.
show the yeah, it is going into a supermarket and you're seeing somebody work out. But it's a large enough Whole Foods that they actually have a section where you're able to work out. And having these things called fit clubs, which which we do it, and just kind of promote the portion control. Just actually, especially people that go into a supermarket, what'll happen is they'll buy all these healthy foods, but don't know how to portion that out. So they still overindulge.
And how can people
so
contact
I have
you?
that coming along, and just as time goes on, I'm still trying to work on different projects to be able to just really outreach. But definitely, targeting the my old community is on the agenda.
You have a few things that you've mentioned that are coming up. How can people learn more about them?
Well, they can obviously reach me at Facebook. You can reach me at Mike Collazo. I'm at on Instagram at Mike Mula. That's MULA. That's Mike MULA 77. On Instagram, Facebook, Mike Collazo. That's COLLA, Z as in zebra, O. And just instant message me, and I'll definitely reach out, give you feedback, and help out as much as possible.
Wonderful. Well, again, I'm your host. I'm Shannon Lee. I will hopefully be doing these as either weekly or bi-weekly shows, Your Healthy Blissful Life. Thank you for joining us. You can reach me online. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, and I'm on Facebook at Healthy Blissful. You can also reach me at my website, which is healthyblissfulmom.com. So I hope to be able to provide, a lot more education with a lot of different experts. And Ernest and Mike, thank you so much for joining me tonight. It was informative and entertaining. I'm glad that you all could join me on a Thursday night. I really appreciate it. And thank you everybody for joining. Are there any last minute questions from the viewers? No. All right. You gentlemen have a great evening.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Ernest, good night. Have a
good night.
Thanks. Bye.